Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today in this new format. The Civilitas Foundation has decided not to substitute our regular monthly discussions, but rather to add a new format to them, with the assumption that a dialogue between people and leaders is needed, with media intermediation or without. Hence, we would like, with this meeting, to kickstart a new monthly series, because every month we will be inviting leaders from different sectors, political, governmental, educational leaders, and we would like to invite you to nominate leaders. With your recommendations, we will address public leaders, other leaders, asking them to come here to visit with us, to visit with you, and to engage in a question and answer format with people. We're grateful to Aram Abrahamyan, editor-in-chief of Aravot daily, for accepting our invitation to be the moderator of this series. We would like to ask you to participate in the same spirit in which we have extended the invitation to you. So talk about the real issues, try to better understand the situation and the opinions of the speakers. It is quite natural that the first guest, I would say the first victim, says Mr. Oskanian, is the first guest who is the founder of the Civilitas Foundation. Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Aram Abrahamyan. Just a few remarks on housekeeping. I have a microphone that I will hand over to you. There will be a young one and a young lady who will hand out microphones to you. When you want to pose a question, I will retain the right to interrupt you in two cases. First, if it is a speech and not a question. Those who are my colleagues and journalists know this, but I will say this for the others. Let us avoid the questions that imply yes or no answers. Don't you think that, and then followed by a long speech. In that case, the guest may say yes or no, and that will be the end of the answer. Or if the same question is posed in the same question is posed in different variations several times, I will interrupt again to make it interesting for everyone, but not to assert any despotic pressure. I personally have 2-3 questions to Mr. Oskanian. Did you want to make some opening remarks? No? So we can start right away with the questions. And perhaps the closest to your public speeches was your statement on the coalition memorandum. I would like to ask you to comment why you really disliked that memorandum. Well, first of all, because it was very premature to sign that memorandum. There's still over a year before the parliamentary election and over 1.5 years to the presidential election. Now, stating in advance who will be the candidate of 3 parties is a bit premature, in my opinion. Secondly, I believe in the concept of balances. I think that every democratic system cannot be effective unless within the political system there are counterweights. I was hoping that the prosperous Armenia party could assume a role, provided that it maintained its autonomy in being a part of the counterweight, the balance. I think the country as a whole, the people, would have benefited from it. It would have been fair elections would have been much more likely in that case. Unfortunately, a different decision was taken. I respect the decision. I disagree with it, but I do respect it, and that's why I criticized it. It was premature in terms of the timing, and I think that some hopes of some people, because I know and I talked to the people, were dispelled. That is the main reason. Mr. Oskanian, don't you think that the counterweights do exist in the face of the current opposition, the Armenian National Congress, the Heritage Party, Dashnaks, Tigran Karapetovic, and the others. Look, the Prosperous Armenia Party, according to recent polls, surveys, and recent public attitudes, I would think that would have increased, augmented the capacity of the counterweight. I do see a counterweight balance, but with the counterweight we participated in earlier elections, they did not yield any results. Prosperous Armenia was the only factor that would have augmented the counterweight in upcoming elections. That is why I regret missing the chance. There's still certainly time. The gap that was created by the signing of the memorandum can still be filled. Those who still have hopes with the Prosperous Armenia could join others, and in this way the counterweight could be augmented. Today we need to create the counterweight to engage in the election with counterweight and to have, as a result of the election, some political counterweight that really is genuine counterweight and not just superficial. Look at today's coalition. It's a formality because superficial, because the Republican Party has absolute majority. The other coalition members really do not play any role. It would be a true coalition if one of the parties did not have absolute majority. In that case, we would have a genuine coalition. The presence of the Prosperous Armenia Party did increase those possibilities, but the possibility was diminished recently again. I reiterate that there is still time, there can be developments. The situation in the country is such that I think that people have already started to view elections differently, and I hope that in the next election the concept of the counterweight can really be developed in reality. Just a final question for me before I turn to you. You must be ready with your questions by now. Some people assert that for the government, the power for the struggle is between the incumbent president who wants to be elected and the second president of Armenia who wants to be re-elected and the first president who wants to be elected again. If this is the case, then why is it so? Leverage, money, resources. If it is not the case, then do you see any other serious forces? Aram, let's distinguish between the parliamentary and presidential elections. When I spoke about the counterweight, I meant the parliamentary election. The presidential election is completely different. I think that the parliamentary election, in a way, will predetermine the outcome of the presidential election. Under our constitution, every citizen has the right to be a candidate. Resources do matter, but the right is there. I respect the courage of the first president to be nominated. The incumbent president naturally will want to be re-elected. There will probably be other candidates, but before the presidential election, the political atmosphere may need to change through parliamentary elections. If this doesn't happen, then I'm worried that we may face some negative consequences after the presidential election too. This is why I emphasize the parliamentary election. I think it is more important than the presidential election. Thank you, Mr. Oskanian. If there are no questions, I can definitely pose questions, but let us turn to the floor, please. Vartan Political Scientist. Hello, Mr. Oskanian. My question is on the topic of my research. To what extent is the public opinion reckoned with in elaborating foreign policy in the years when you were the Minister of Foreign Affairs? To what extent was it taken into consideration? Look, the public opinion, of course, is always taken into consideration. There are some principles through which the policy, or by which the policymakers are guided. But the public opinion is certainly taken into account as well, and this is natural for our state. For the key issues of foreign policy, when I was the minister, there was a general agreement or overlap between our perceptions, our approaches, and the public opinion on Nagorno-Karabakh and on the Armenian-Turkish relationship, and generally on our regional policy as a whole. So this issue, at least for me, was never acutely raised. I do not recall any step taken that triggered strong public reaction. The situation today is different. The Armenian-Turkish relationship, for example, triggered a rather negative response. On Karabakh, there are diverging reactions. Our society, including the diaspora, has never before been so divided on foreign policy matters. When we were there, the issue was not as acute. How the public opinion is taken into account, it's difficult for me to tell. My impression, at least, was that the public opinion wasn't really taken into account. From day one, the authorities went on with whatever they had decided, contrary to the public opinion, although I believe that the public opinion, majority in the public opinion, disagreed with that policy line, but the government decided to sign the document. They also declared that they're ready to ratify the documents, the protocols. Your questions, please. I will approach you. My question is this. Why are you hopeful that the Prosperous Armenia party will act as a counterweight? The political leader of that party is not politically mature. The members aren't either. All of them hold positions. Why are you so hopeful? Are you hopeful because when you were the minister, Prosperous Armenia was a government project, as they say? Is that why you hope? Well, look, it really has nothing to do with the history. I'm just looking at the existing situation today. Look, there's some political dough, and we have to work with it if we want to have a good product. New forces in politics do not randomly appear, and they do not fall from the blue. We have what we have today, and you're right. It is a product of our society. It is a product of our political activities. The 20 years of work. But if you look at the current situation and what there is, and if you think for a moment what we want to do, where we want to go, what kind of a system we want to create, what kind of a state we want to create, you see there isn't much of an alternative than to think based on the existing forces, what reshuffling is possible so that this political monopoly, which is prevalent today, is somehow, somewhere mitigated, neutralized. My profound belief is that the greatest problem in Armenia today isn't the economic monopoly, it isn't injustice, corruption, and numerous other drawbacks which are rather problematic. But if you asked me what the key problem is, where one has to start to be able to overcome the other deficiencies, I will tell you, it is the political monopoly. After all, politics is the foundation of everything. All the rest serve the reproduction of the political monopoly. So if any political party which is in the country, active in the country, is genuinely interested in the future of the country and acts as true counterweight to today's ruling party, then I think it will be possible to change something in Armenia. That's why, by the Prosperous Armenia moving there, I was a bit disillusioned, because one element of it basically moved away, departed, and the situation became a bit more difficult. That's all. I don't want to pass any judgment on any of the parties. I don't want to think what ulterior motives they have, who serves whom. I'm just looking at the existing situation, the existing raw material. If we can process it properly, then I think we can produce something that can serve better the country and the people. No, would you please, the young lady here, pick up the microphone, please. Martik Tat, the Republican Kagik Melikian, having heard your criticism, said that it's political blindness and child-mindedness. It's true that you're not in foreign policy today, but what do you think this attitude towards you indicates on the part of the Republican Party? My criticism, I mean, you're right that the Republican Party accepts my criticism with much pain. I don't have an explanation for that. I would suggest you asking them why they accept it with so much pain. Microphone. They accuse you of political blindness and of thinking as a child, or thinking like a child. What do you have to say on that? Look, I don't even want to comment that. Everyone is free to put any label they like. Being in the government, knowing what happened behind the curtains, and having my vision for the future of the country. Today, I pinpoint and criticize the phenomena that I think are negative, and that I think disturb the proper development of this country. I will continue doing so on foreign policy issues and in domestic issues. It's been 20 years, look, since Armenia became independent. This year we will celebrate the 20th anniversary. I'm sure that the government will festively celebrate it. We are going to hear only positive things, but I think that 20 years it should be an occasion for reflection. We have to clearly evaluate the path we have traveled. In those 20 years, what mistakes we have made, what we have done right, what we can learn from our lessons, how we can learn from our lessons, what we can do to make sure that the next decade is more productive for the development of Armenia. We look at the situation, and look, really, it's quite complicated. People are just disillusioned, desperate. People are leaving the country. They're emigrating. This is perhaps our biggest misfortune. We have to somehow curb it, to stop it. The only way to stop it is to be honest towards ourselves, to properly evaluate what we have been through and set correct targets for the development of the country over the next decade. It is only with this hope that I think our people will have faith, stay in the country and make their contribution to the development of our country. Moderator, thank you. Hi, Khalachan Pan-Armenian Net Agency. Mr. Oskanian, the Armenian National Congress will be having a demonstration, a rally tomorrow, and some representatives of the ANC claim that the Egyptian-Tunisian scenario is to be repeated in Armenia. They are going to urge to engage in abrupt action. Do you think this revolution or coup d'etat, the revolution attempt, is possible tomorrow? Tomorrow? Will it happen tomorrow? Because tomorrow is the anniversary, right? And some people claim exactly that. Well, look, I will give a general answer to that question. I don't know what will happen exactly tomorrow, but I wouldn't like Armenia to go through or experience such shocks. Our people do not need it. If such shocks occur, like what's happening in Libya today, or what happened in Egypt or the Arab world, our country for years or can be thrown back years or even decades, and our people do not need this. But there's one thing I wish to draw your attention to here. The phenomena that caused or stirred up the shocks in the Arab world, these revolutions in the Arab world, the very same problems are faced today in Armenia. Political monopoly, corruption, poverty, all the negative phenomena, unemployment, wealth accumulation in the hands of a small group of individuals. All of these were the reasons in the Arab world for people to rise up. Unfortunately, the same phenomena are present in Armenia today. I'm not urging anyone to move in the same direction. Not at all. I wouldn't like our people to experience the same shocks, but what happens in the Arab world should ring a bell of alarm to all of us. First of all, the government, the opposition, and the public. Eventually, these problems have to be addressed, because one day it may all implode, and we shouldn't allow it to get to the point where we will regret having allowed the situation to escalate to a point where our people will massively fill the streets and throw the country into a shock. Good afternoon, Aram Abrahamyan. I represent the conference of the plenipotentiaries of the Azerbaijan Armenians. Today we had a session of our organizational committee, and I want to pass on to you the questions asked there. Just one question. One question is difficult. Just one question at a time, please. We know that in 2002, 3, and even earlier, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Academy of Science were repeatedly inquired about the comprehensive investigation of the violence against Armenians perpetrated in Azerbaijan. There is still no answer to this inquiry. The Armenian refugees are thus omitted from the negotiations. Your question, please. Okay, my question is this. It never got included in the agenda up to now, while even the crisis group, with its racist analysis, claimed that Armenians should not live in those territories. They mean the liberated territories. Since 2003, state policy was conducted in a way that these territories... Oh, no, your question. I understand roughly. About 8,000 resettlers only remain. We have sent some of our letters to the Civilitas Foundation, and we try to clarify our positions on our vision for a solution of these problems. We hope that you have read our letters. Now the question is this. What do you think can be done for the Armenian refugees to be included in the agenda, to join the talks? And my second question, do you see, personally you, as an experienced politician, an ex-public official and the current political leader, what ways of cooperating with the Azerbaijan Armenians do you see? Thank you. Please do not ask such questions. Ask a question without a long introduction. On the question of the refugees, I can assure you that the question of the refugees has always been in the agenda. It hasn't been one of the top priorities because before getting to it, we had to agree upon many other aspects before we could focus on the question of the refugees. But certainly the question of the refugees bilaterally, mutually, has been in the agenda, rest assured. Every time Azerbaijan makes its false claim of 1 million refugees, they keep asserting that there are 1 million refugees. Do you think the Armenian side wouldn't respond and raise the issue of the Armenian refugees? Of course not, because the emphasis was on status, was on prevention of war and other issues. It wasn't the question of the refugees was not publicized so much, but I can assure you, rest assured, that question has always been in the agenda. What you sent to the Civilitas, I have to admit, I haven't seen yet. Now I promise to you, if it got to us, then I'm sure my colleagues will present. I will look into it, and then after that, perhaps we can meet and talk over future cooperation. Aravot Media Max Agency. Mr. Oskanian, when you were there, you were in the government, the word complementarity was actively used. We heard that the foreign policy of Armenia was based on the principle of complementarity. At this point today, do you think the Armenian government is essentially carrying on with the same policy, or have they abandoned it? No, they have abandoned it. The mere fact that for 3 years I haven't heard the word complementarity once spoken by the President or the Minister of Foreign Affairs makes it obvious that they have abandoned it. But following their policy, I can also tell you I don't see any bases for complementarity in the current politics. Our regional policy today does not have any ideological basis. That's why it is creating serious difficulties for our foreign policy makers. It is also negatively affecting the Armenian-Turkish relationship. The solution of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, it also poses difficulties in terms of our ability to carry out a balanced policy vis-à-vis the US and Russia. Complementarity was applied by us for over 10 years. I can assure you that it was effective for Armenia. If you asked me, Armenia has no alternative, no other way. We hear about a multi-vector policy. What is multi-vector? A vector is direction. I think it just means really not knowing what to do. Complementarity contains some substance in the sense that a relationship with one country is complemented with the relationship with another country in specific areas so as to maximize its productivity for the country. There is substance in it. A balanced policy is not the same as complementarity. Petrosyan claimed to be engaged in balanced policy. We introduced complementarity. They now say multi-vector policy. It seems like the semantics have changed only, the vocabulary has changed, but look, really substance has changed. A balanced policy implies that if we do something with Russia, regardless of whether you need or not, you were thinking how you make sure that you actually balance it with the US to make sure that one is not offended about the other. It is a policy which is an end in itself. Complementarity has profound substance. A multi-vector policy, in my opinion, really doesn't imply anything specific. It is just about ad hoc decision making and ad hoc engagement. So I think complementarity should be returned, brought back into the foundation of our foreign policy so we can engage more effectively in the region and beyond. I'm sorry, could you say that that deviation from complementarity occurred towards pro-Russianism? At least in terms of perception, that is what it is. I say sometimes jokingly that complementarity is used now in the opposite direction. In the past, we received positive impulses equally from the US and Russia. Now it's the other way. The US think that we are the forepost of Russia. And Russia thinks that we are too close to the US now. I think that there were still 10 years for the prolongation of the agreement on the Russian military bases. And the premature prolongation that was sought, requested, or forced on us for 40 years bears testament to the lack of a complementarity policy. And it is evidence of the uncertainty in regional policy, and it is also evidence of the loss of confidence in the big powers. Good afternoon, Mr. Oskanian, Aram Abrahamyan, Association of Eurasian Scholars. Professor, I have just one question. I know that for many years, you have been in this region. I just have one question. Don't you think that it is now a long time to create an Institute of Turkish Studies? It should be extremely important and provide to us answers to many questions. What is your opinion? Thank you. Absolutely, yes. The better we know the opponent, the better we know our opponent, the more productive will be our engagement with the opponent. No doubt. Right. It would be good to have an institute. Ottoman studies, I think, also have to be reinstituted. We used to have it. We have no Ottoman scientists or those who study, those who engage in Ottoman studies in Armenia. I know one or two perhaps, but this is an urgency and something has to be done. I fully concur with your view. Artyom Khachaturian, Noyantapan Highlights Weekly. I will first pose the question because that was the requirement, but then I will explain why I posed the question in such a manner. You rightly said that one of the key political issues that we face today is the political monopoly, which has to be eliminated, and you're vesting hope with the Prosperous Armenia Party. My question is this: do you really hope that, at least to some extent, the monopoly could be mitigated by the Armenian National Congress and this political forces around Petrosyan? Let me explain why I posed this question in this way. In the 2007 parliamentary election, that factor was non-existent. Petrosyan's Armenian National Congress simply didn't exist. The political forces that are now around him virtually did not engage. Or basically, they didn't engage, they didn't participate in the parliamentary election. Prosperous Armenia superficially participated as a force based on an individual, and it pretended to be, I understand your question, let me answer. It pretended to be an ally to the ruling party. They claimed that they should participate in building the success of Armenia. I believe this is what they said. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the question. Thank you. For me not to be misunderstood and for the media not to misquote me tomorrow, I want to give an example. I don't want to create a misperception that prosperous Armenia is all my hope. No. I said, and let me repeat, if prosperous Armenia retained its autonomy, it would have significantly contributed to amplifying the opportunity for creating counterweight. To just give you an example, imagine we are in the election campaign, the Republican Party with the Orinatsi Ergir, clearly, then Prosperous Armenia, then the ANC, the Tashnak Tsutyun, Jarangutyun, Heritage Party, and others. With this format, the likelihood for anyone to have majority in a more or less decent election would be less than 50%. With this format, with that format, if everyone sincerely, genuinely retains autonomy and doesn't gamble and wants to really play a genuine role, assume a genuine role, and imagine after such an election, in the best case, the top winner would get 40%. Imagine what change would happen in Armenia. The winning political force would now have to consult everyone, negotiate with everyone to see with whom they could make a real coalition. Then after they make a coalition, once an important issue for people came up, it wouldn't be all decided in one office. That coalition would really have true value. It would be expressing an opinion. The government might actually fail. The government might be dismissed. Such things in Armenia's current political system are non-existent. That is why I said that if the Republican Party had this consciousness and did not insist, did not put pressure, if they did put pressure, I don't know if they say that it was done by persuasion, but if they realized that the other option would be much more useful, much more helpful, and if they had chosen the other option, then we would have some possibility to change something in our political system. This is all I want to say. It may be wishful thinking, you may think it is a naive desire, but given that democracy has no other system, there's no other system, and that nothing new is going to happen, this is the only way forward. As for the question whether the ANC with Heritage and others separately could act as counterweight, certainly it could. The likelihood is less with Bargavac being and Prosperous Armenia being on the other side, but it is still possible. And I do hope that we will really see this happen, because this counterweight should be created. First of all, we have to fight against the political monopoly. Armenia Tarpinyan, Armenian Assembly of America. Please state your questions more briefly, Mr. Oskanian, for obvious reasons. The diaspora knows you very well, and I'm sure that you share the concerns in the diaspora. In this sense, how would you comment Diaspora Minister Mrs. Hagopian's famous statement about the creation of a second chamber in the parliament? Thank you. Look, that statement caught me in a surprise, because that question wasn't discussed in Armenia, it wasn't ripe. I think, like in many other areas, here too, there was a rush, there was some discussion that happened somewhere with the political circles. The minister probably rushed to announce it, to speak about it. It's definitely not time now to talk about it, especially because such questions should not be tested in the diaspora, and they should be tested first on the ground in Armenia. People in Armenia shouldn't hear about such important questions from the diaspora or from the diaspora minister. If there are such issues, they have to be discussed with the public in Armenia before the diaspora can be engaged. So the specific answer to your question, how I commented, I'm a bit surprised that such an announcement was made, and it was made in the diaspora, and it was made all together. The idea for a small country like Armenia, one can really doubt whether two chambers are needed in the parliament. Really, just 3 million people, 10 regions, small country, why would one need it? There's no need for it, especially if they want to engage the diaspora. There are other ways of engaging the diaspora. You don't need to necessarily create a second parliamentary chamber to engage the diaspora in it. Necessarily is not the case. Vartan and Mr. Oskanian, allow me to pose two questions to you. Public political circles associate in one way or another your name with the second president, Robert Kocharyan. They also claim that your action is coordinated by him. After so many years of work, what is your relationship today with Robert Kocharyan on a personal note and in political terms? And second question, elections are coming up. Will you be active in the election? Will you be nominated, or will you support some political forces? This lady is a journalist, perhaps, yes, from Gala television. The relationship with the second president, Robert Kocharyan. I worked with him for 10 years. I worked with him before that, when he was the president of the Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh, and I was the key negotiator for Karabakh. We dealt with him, and so many years of effective cooperation were based on mutual respect and mutual trust, and also mutual ability to understand and evaluate one another's potential. I did really work very productively with Kocharyan. After retirement, I still stay in touch with Kocharyan. I meet with Kocharyan regularly. We talk about the situation in the country. We don't have any joint activities. Kocharyan does not dictate anything ever upon me. I do not make any requests, political or other, to Kocharyan. It's just that our professional cooperation is continuing in a friendly way. We have regular meetings. The accusation that we often hear when Kocharyan says something, they say it's assumed that through me, Kocharyan wants to convey a message. Look, it is such a primitive assumption that I do not even want to respond to it. But I do want to say the following about it, but not to you. This is not to you. The people who make these accusations, who make these allegations, are actually thinking that they judge me the way they deserve to be judged. Those people in their lives have never had autonomy, and they have always carried out somebody's order and instruction. There are so many people like that in Armenia today, inherited from the Soviet era, and others. That tendency is deeply rooted in our society. We have to give up on it. People are autonomous, independent. There's a politician emerging in today, and people are following him, and they say, this is a government project, this is a conspiracy, this is a game, this one is playing the game of that one. Look, this is really a flaw. This reveals a flaw in our mindset. This is not the case. People should stop judging others by their standards or by what they are. Eventually, people are independent, people are autonomous, people think on their own, people have their ideas, people have their commitment to this country. And there are other principles eventually that one could follow. One more question by the colleague. How will you participate, or will you not participate in the upcoming election? On the election, parliamentary, I probably really haven't made a decision. Depends on the situation, it depends on the developments. Thereafter I will decide. While it's true that you may say that time is flying and there's little time left to the parliamentary election, I think that actually there is time still. There's still time. In the the upcoming few months, depending on the developments, I will decide how to proceed further. Your question, please. Thank you, Edikov Sepyan. I will be brief, for sure. Don't you think that we attach too much importance to the signed coalition memorandum, something it really doesn't deserve? And because there's still much time, why should the coalition determine the fate of the coalition now? Well, maybe, maybe. I couldn't say, but eventually people signed it. It's a pledge. It's putting faith in something. Time will tell. Thank you. Thank you, Ashot Mirzoyan, Consumer Support Center. Mr. Oskanian, I think that major changes taking place in the world, and new power centers are emerging. I think the Armenian government do not know what to do. They don't see the way forward. And this memorandum shows it, demonstrates it. They claim to be together. They claim to be in the coalition. People are disillusioned, emigrating. They're disgusted about homeland. I think fatherland is moving towards destruction. Many facts illustrate this. What do you think is the force? What do you think is the national idea that will turn people to that idea? What is the force around which people can come together and stay in their country and actually make transformation happen? To be brief, how do you see this political monopoly being cracked? How can this monopoly be cracked in political ways, not like Egypt or others? Look, one of the ways I described already, and I named specific parties, is, in my opinion, one of the best ways. Even today, apparently, through election, it is possible. Not much depends on the people. If people rid themselves of the apathy and truly put faith in political change being the driver behind all other change, and people fulfilling their civic duty, voting in the election, pursuing their vote, following up on their vote, and if they find massive vote fraud that affected the outcome of the election, then truly voicing their protest. In this way, I think something can be done. Unfortunately, today our people, when they are disillusioned, they don't go fill the streets, they actually leave the country. This is truly our most painful reality. I would like our people to follow up on their civic duties more persistently, to stand up for their claims. I do see the political way of changing much in Armenia, and much depends on the people. What force exactly can lead, I cannot tell you right now. Because look, in the Arab world, what happened is that in the 3 or 4 countries where there's been much turmoil, and change will obviously happen in these countries, those movements did not have any leaders. There's not a single individual emerging as of yet. It was all a demonstration of the people's collective political will, so it is possible. The reason I say this is, don't always expect that there will be a leader. Don't expect that there will have to be a political force. People can do this on their own. That's why I say much depends on the people. Much depends on the individual. Okay, with my ideology and my ideas, I'm a liberal. Liberalism is based on 2 things. Individuality, the individual, right? And equal rights for the individuals. I believe that we have to build a proper society, a strong society for the individuals to live well, and not at the expense of the individual, because it all boils down to the individual, to you, and you. You have to think what is done for you. The government should think that by doing something specific, it is having an impact. It is affecting the individual, not society, but the individual. That is one of the cornerstones of liberalism, and if we follow it, then I think political coup d'etat can happen in our minds. Thank you. Victoria, please. Thank you. Mr. Oskanian, as you confirmed that you've worked long with Mr. Kocharyan and you know each other very well. Would you please help us in this sense? This is my question. How would you explain Mr. Kocharyan's recent statement that he prepared the list of the Republican Party? If he wanted, it would be done earlier. Do you think Mr. Kocharyan really wants to return to the big game, and what can be the consequences of his return? Well, that one you have to ask Mr. Kocharyan. There is no way to ask him a question. So you, as somebody who knows him very well, I pose to you this question. No matter how well I know him, I really cannot penetrate or infiltrate Mr. Kocharyan's mind, and I cannot answer for him. Victoria is from A1+. Aram Abrahamyan, Public Administration Academy postgraduate student. As the dear organizers invited us to recommend future speakers, we would ask Robert Kocharyan to be the next invitee, so he would answer all these questions face to face. I can promise to you I will invite him, but I don't know if he will come the next time, but I'm sure that one day he will come. Don't you think that in recent years, or actually not just recent years, but in all of the last 20 years, the main reason our political monopoly was created was that we mostly witnessed different individuals or inner circles struggling against one another. We did not witness a struggle of ideologies. Would you agree that the political monopoly can be cracked mainly by an ideological struggle? What do you think can be done to have an ideological struggle? Well, clearly, the ideological struggle is important. Unfortunately, over the years, the political struggle was not around ideas, it was over the monopoly. It was over the power of the individuals. I think that if we actually manage to overcome the political monopoly, the ideology will come to the forefront naturally. Now, as the coalition is a formality, and it's not possible within the coalition to have major political disagreement, then it is not at the forefront. It is on the backdrop. When this political monopoly is really cracked and there are genuine coalitions, I'm sure that if that happens, the political ideology will become the priority. When I spoke about the counterweight, I just want to make an addition. Counterweight doesn't only mean that there are two forces or several forces in the political system balancing one another. No, there is also the self-balance or self-counterweight notion. The political forces are convinced that through elections, people are really capable of changing the government, then naturally self-counterweighting will also work. In a democratic system, it is possible that people go and the majority of people vote for one party. One party can get absolute majority. But if that political force which gets absolute majority itself is convinced that people voted for it, and in the next election people may not vote for it, then whilst having that majority, that force will exercise self-scrutiny and self-control. In that case, they will become more sensitive to the public opinion. Today, as there isn't that self-balancing concern, there aren't real, genuine counterweights, the ruling party is absolutely free to decide whatever, to carry out whatever policy, regardless of whether people like it or dislike it, being sure that they will win the next election as well. So the counterweight is on two dimensions. One, counterweight between forces, and then the self-balancing counterweight notion. Our scholar friend, who can be given the microphone once again. Thank you. Mr. Oskanian, we're observing and seeing how Turkey, please understand my questions as functional questions, fundamental questions. We see how Turkey is promoting its interests and blending its stakes in Afghanistan and the Middle East. For our future, at least, I personally think that for our future, isn't it time for us today to try to develop some trade relations, to develop some commerce relationship and some political relationship with the Arab world, which is next door to us? I'm sure that you're well familiar with their economies. Basic food security concerns, for example, can be addressed that they have and we have, and we can be mutually helpful in meeting the food security needs. At this point in time, in the current situation in the Arab world, it might sound blunt, but can we actually capitalize on this situation? Sincerely, I don't really understand your point, frankly, but later, do not take any time away. Over coffee, definitely, please come up and we will answer. I don't want to give you a random answer. Any other questions? A repetition. New people? Any new people? Here's one. It's been 2.5 years since the Civilitas Foundation was created. But to date, in these many discussions, No one ever asks whether Civilitas is about responsible citizenship. My understanding was that your organization was created to facilitate creation of civil society. The question is this: in your opinion, over the 2.5 years, have you succeeded at this? Have you succeeded in building a civil society? What do you see? Do you see any feedback? Do you see any results? Small but we have made a contribution. I do see progress in this matter. We have our initiatives, we have our website, and we disseminate over the website. We don't have extensive penetration in society. We cannot engage the public at large, but with small steps, I think that we have actually made some progress. I'm happy with the 2.5 years of work. I think that this year, next year, we will be much more active. We have greater possibilities now. Over the 2.5 years, a very serious team has come together around Civilitas. Committed people who believe in what we do, who share our views, and I am sure that this year, next year, we will hear much more of Civilitas, and we will be able to make a much greater impact on civil consciousness, and we will engage the public at large. If there is no one new, then we can do second questions. Mr. Oskanian, in the public perception, especially in the opposition, you are perceived, if not that someone who is directly responsible for the events of the 1st of March, but as somebody who supported what happened and somebody who covered up what happened. How would you respond to all these allegations? And you, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, decided to make statements after the March events, which was not part of your function as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you. This is an important question. Let me just say immediately, I wasn't participating, covering up, or any of that. But allow me to give a longer answer to this question, because tomorrow is the 1st of March, and I really want to explain this because this question keeps coming up before me. I'm not offended by it. Actually, I'm happy that this question is posed to me, because with this, people today are, thinking that I'm responsible for certain things, not the 1st of March, but generally, in terms of our activities, they expected then something other than what happened of me. So I'm not offended about these questions. As I said, I'm actually even satisfied that these questions are posed to me. So I want to give an exhaustive answer. I have said this repeatedly. It may have been fragmented, but on the eve of the 1st of March, I want to present this to society. The 1st of March really was a great misfortune, no doubt about it. It should not have happened in Armenia. This is not dignifying for us. It threw us back in domestic matters and on foreign matters as well. But it occurred, so how can this be prevented in the future? I was hoping that the 2.5 or 3 years, the government would have been able to heal this wound forever, but the wound is still not healed for a number of reasons. I really hope that this wound can be healed. About my role, when I was proposed to have a press conference on the 1st of March, I accepted this for 2 reasons. First, my political responsibility, being in a leadership position, the responsibility associated with being in a leadership position. I sensed that someone had to speak with the people on that day. Silence in these conditions, when serious events occurred in the morning, clashes occurred in the morning between the police and society, and large numbers of people are accumulating somewhere else. There are strong emotions. Silence would be the most dangerous thing. So first of all, I felt responsibility as one of the leaders then, why I accepted to agree to make the speech. And when I made the speech, it was 6 p.m. The morning events had occurred. There were no victims. There were some clashes. People were injured, but there had been no shooting. The first time shots were fired was at 9 p.m. I made my speech at 6 p.m. out of a sense of responsibility, but it wasn't enough. That day, I made a serious precondition to the president of the country. I told the president that he should promise to me that if I state in my press conference that the president was ready to engage in dialogue with the opposition at that time to seek ways out of the difficult situation, he had to agree to that. He had to agree to that to make the speech and to make the press conference. The president actually agreed to that. If you watch my press interview, it's on YouTube, I said there that I had the president's agreement and promised to engage in dialogue, and I called upon the opposition to initiate, to approach us so that we could together find a way out of that difficult situation. I think that on that day, I was an individual who made an attempt at prevention, not an accomplice, a participant, or trying to cheat people or explain something to the people. It wasn't the case at all. Even people close to me say that this is too much of a burden on you. You might really actually apologize for it. But look, I see absolutely, I have absolutely no problem with apologizing. One can apologize, but for the apology to be a sincere apology, a frank apology, I have to first of all believe that I have done something wrong. If I don't sense having done anything wrong, apologizing would be unfair and dishonest. I could apologize and say this is over, and I could even become a hero. Oh, look, there's someone so sincere in society who can actually apologize. The apology would not be frank, it wouldn't be sincere, because it would be a lie, because I don't sense having done anything wrong. First of all, if I did sense having done anything wrong, if I sensed back then to be doing anything wrong, I wouldn't do it at that time. That's the reality. Before the microphone is handed over, you said that over 3 years the government could heal the wound. How do you think it could be done? One of the simplest ways would be to release all the prisoners who were imprisoned as a result of the events of that day. I think that one of the first decisions of the president, one of the first documents to be signed by the president would have been that, and I hoped that the president would do it. I hoped that after his inauguration at the opera, after he went to the office, that would be the first thing he did. You might say that there are some issues with law and legality. Truly so. He might not have done it on day one, but with all factors and circumstances taken into account, he could have found a way to release these people. It would be the first step towards healing the wound. Had it been done, I'm sure that today, on the eve of the 1st of March, we would be politically, morally, spiritually on a different level. The last question there, please. Thank you to the person who posed the question before me. I want to continue. You said people, rather than to correct the situation, leave the country. The consequences of the 1st of March, the aftermath of the 1st of March. What's the impact of the consequences of the 1st of March? And my second question, what ways do you see of mitigating Turkey's role in this region? On the 1st of March, I don't want to repeat. I already stated my assessment. It is really one of our most painful elements in our history, one of the darkest pages in our newest history. I don't want to make any further comments. To mitigate Turkey's impact on the region, in the Armenian-Turkish process, we should be able to make more abrupt change happen. With the Armenian-Turkish process, we gave this possibility to Turkey to engage more closely in the region and with the Nagorno-Karabakh issue. Turkey has ample opportunity, and Turkey is fully using the opportunity up to today. The president suspended the process, but even at that time I said that it was not sufficient. On the contrary, it lifted the pressure from Turkey to do anything to ratify as stipulated. By removing that pressure from Turkey, it did not limit Turkey's role vis-a-vis Nagorno-Karabakh. So on the one hand, we got nothing with the suspension. On the other, Turkey continues to engage actively in the region. One of the ways for Armenia is to limit and to isolate Turkey from Karabakh. On other matters, it doesn't depend on us. It's much harder. It's Azerbaijan, Turkey, Georgia. There are numerous projects between them, a railway being built, there's the oil pipeline, the gas pipeline, there's commerce, and we cannot really interfere with it. But for us, I do see possibilities. Mr. Oskanian, just a small question for me, and the lady will be given the floor for the last, really final question. Before the 1st of March, the employees of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs made a statement. They said there can be a bloodshed. How do you evaluate their act? I evaluated their act back then, if I may say so. I say this with pain. Those boys were fired. Look, I followed the letter of the law. The novelty there, and I think it hasn't been stated before, is that the statement that was made by 5 or 6 diplomats with the same substance was made a day or proposed to me a day earlier by my spokesperson, or on the same day perhaps, and I refused. The same evening or the next evening, the text that I refused was announced by some 5 or 6 diplomats. Now imagine my spokesperson comes to my office and says, look, on Turkey, Azerbaijan, Karabakh, Georgia, or in a relationship with whatever country, here is a statement, here is a proposed text of a statement, let us make it. This is a natural process, it's business as usual. And I say no, I disagree with that text, the text of the announcement. And then an hour, 2 hours later, 5 diplomats coming out and making such a statement, what would you do? Clearly you would fire them, right? It's true that it is a matter of foreign policy, and this is a matter of domestic policy, a matter of security and existence, but really the cases are the same. A democratic country such as the U.S. fired John Evans. Why? Because he deviated from the foreign policy of the U.S. He uttered the word genocide. Just for that word, a democratic country such as the U.S. fired the ambassador. For us, it was a full text to which the minister had disagreed. So I think this is very negative practice. It's a pity that we had to do this, because all of them were really good men. They had made a contribution they could be to doing much more with the ministry, but unfortunately it happened. The real final last question, just a clarifying question. What do you think? After those arrested after the 1st of March political prisoners, and that's why they should be released? And secondly, the problems that you mentioned today existed also when you were in government. In terms of any change for the better, has anything been done? And would the return of the second president do any good for the politics in the country? Really, 3 questions. On the return of the president, I have nothing else to say. I already said that you can ask those questions to the second president. And as for my criticism on the issues that existed when I was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, look, I do not accept the logic. I do not see the logic. If we said that we cannot criticize the problems that existed when we were in office, it would mean that today anyone who is engaged in politics, with rare exceptions, everyone who is engaged in politics would have no right to criticize anything, because all of them are ex-officials. In one way or another, they have been in government in the past. So I refuse the logic. It is very naive interpretation. It isn't how states and societies are formed or developed. I think that every individual who was sincere and frank during his term in office, did not abuse office for personal gain, has today every moral right to raise every question and every issue, regardless of how the issues were manifested when he or she was in office. What was the other question? On the political prisoners? Well, when I use the term, the way I define it is this: persons deprived of liberty as a result of their political activities. Perhaps the same things, but I prefer my wording. I think that all those who are in prison as a result of their political activities on the 1st of March should have been released from day one. It is still not late. They should still be released so that an important first step is made towards healing the wound. It is belated, but still not all resources have been exhausted. The public is there. There's tension that goes on. We have to try to mitigate it. Thank you for finishing on this optimistic note. Thank you to Mr. Oskanian for the very interesting talk. Thank you to all the participants.